Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Candice Thompson Zachery, Manager of Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives at Dance NYC. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm currently on the land of the Lenape and Canarsie people in what is currently known as Brooklyn, New York. I am a non-disabled Black woman of Caribbean heritage. I'm brown-skinned, I'm wearing a black and white shirt, gold hanging earrings, and a multicolored head wrap, and my background is a green wall. First, thank you for joining us for this digital experience for yet another Tuesday and for being adaptable in these challenging times. As we are at the mercy of technology, we want to remind you that there may be delays, sound issues, and changing circumstances that may occur during our time together. We invite you to extend grace and patience to us as we manage this virtual landscape. Second, ASL interpretation by Sarah An and Kaimi Malave from LC Interpreting Services, as well as closed caption services provided by Cara Dugas of Viscardi Center, will be available throughout the event. At times, due to Zoom to Facebook streaming difficulties, the closed captioning does not stream as accurately as we would like. Therefore, live transcription will be available via a Dance NYC stream to text link now pinned in your comments. Third, please note that this session is being recorded and will be saved on our Facebook Live channel right under videos on the Dance NYC Facebook page under the Artists Are Necessary Workers playlist. These videos do not include closed captions. Sadly, they don't carry over on the Facebook playback. These recordings will therefore be available with closed captioning on our YouTube channel after the series is over. Fourth, feel free to post in the comment section on Facebook with your comments or questions. We will gather them throughout the event and present the most relevant questions time will allow to our panelists. Fifth, in case we need to quickly end this session due to disruption, you will hear us say abort 3 times and end the session. We will then resume within 5 minutes here on Facebook Live. Lastly, help us to amplify these conversations. Hit the share arrow at the bottom of your screen to share this conversation directly to your Facebook page. Repost, tag us, and share your takeaways on Twitter at DanceNYC, on Instagram at dance.nyc, and Facebook dance/NYC using the hashtag Artists Are Necessary Workers, hashtag DanceNYCLive. As we continue to host these conversations, today is our 10th event. We are learning how to create dialogue spaces that reflect both our values as a team and organization, and the intention of the series to dive deeper and hold space for the experiences of dance workers within our community. We're committed to hosting these conversations in as wide a format as possible by using Facebook rather than only Zoom registration for participants. However, as these conversations continue to move through highly public spaces, we have felt it is important to articulate a series of community guidelines by which we hope to hold this space and invite our participants to honor them as we share space together. These guidelines are a living commitment and may grow or change to reflect our learning as a staff, organization, and in relationship to you, its participants and beneficiaries. If you have suggestions or additions or feedback, please send them to info@DanceNYC, and we also invite you to share them via the post-event survey that will be posted in the comments towards the end of today's event. We ask that folks participating or benefiting from today's event via the comments on Facebook follow these guidelines. Upon participating, you are entering a virtual space of learning, reflection, respect, and accountability that is based on Dance NYC's values of justice, equity, and inclusion. Please see our website to learn what these are. This means that we agree to share our opinions, challenge perspectives, and engage or debate respectfully and acknowledge and course correct if harm is caused. Honor everyone's personhood and humanity. Not tolerate speech that is disparaging, abusive, violent, or that is intended to defame someone's character publicly. If anyone acts in violation of these guidelines, they will either be warned and asked to course correct or removed depending on the severity of the action. We thank you for your collective agreement to these guidelines to ensure that our space remains generative for and respectful of our community. And now let's begin A digital future for the arts. Artists are necessary workers, Facebook Live conversation series. As a way of deepening our work and learning in racial justice, we regularly practice land acknowledgements at meetings and public convenings to recognize our country's violent history and its legacy in the space we occupy. This practice is currently under development with the guidance of Indigenous dance artist and activist Emily Johnson to ensure that we embody this allyship. This includes taking actionable steps towards reparations in this initial instance by nurturing relationships with local Indigenous and First Nations artists and organizations, and making pathways for Lenape artists and leaders to return to Lenapehoking today. I would like to acknowledge that the City of New York is on stolen land. More specifically, Lenapehoking, the unceded homeland of the Lenape people, who are also recognized federally as the Delaware Nation of Oklahoma, Anadarko, Oklahoma, Delaware Tribe of Indians, Bartlesville, Oklahoma, Stockbridge Munsee Community, Bowler, Wisconsin, and in Canada, Munsee Delaware Nation, Moravian of the Thames First Nation, Delaware of Six Nations. The Lenape people are the original inhabitants and caretakers of this land and gave Manhattan Island its name, Mannahatta, meaning hilly island or place where we go to gather the wood for the bows. Additionally, as we are gathered digitally and inspired by Adrian Wong of Spiderweb Show in what is currently called Canada, I invite us to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many rural Indigenous communities that at times leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to climate change that disproportionately impacts Indigenous communities worldwide. We acknowledge that changing these inequities are our shared responsibility, as are our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. We recognize that as an organization based in New York City, we have benefited and continue to benefit from the systemic displacement and subsequent erasure of Lenape people and governance on their land. Please join me in taking a moment to recognize and reflect on the centuries of violence, displacement, forced migration, and settlement here, as well as the centuries of resilience and leadership of all Indigenous and First Nations peoples on Turtle Island that have led to our presence and livelihoods in New York City today. Let's take a moment. Continuing our practice of recognition, we would like to name openly the legacies of the African slave trade, migration and immigration patterns, the disability rights and disability justice movements, and the LGBTQ+ fight for justice. These areas and tactics of oppression through which white supremacy and settler colonialism have enacted and sustained its power over time are not the only areas, but rather the main focuses of Dance NYC's ongoing historical acknowledgement practice and our justice, equity, and inclusion strategy. We will also like to take a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims of COVID-19 around the world and to honor the unseen labor of the many people that continue to ensure the safety and well-being of our community in these times, including but not limited to frontline workers. Let's pause for one more moment. Lastly, and certainly not least, we also acknowledge and mourn Cornelius Fredericks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, Justin Howell, Sean Monterosa, Jamel Floyd, Nina Pop, Tony McDade, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Richard Brooks, David McAtee, and all Black people whose lives have been taken by the actions of white people, institutions, and systems, and the many accomplices, witnesses, and beneficiaries of white supremacy who have actively participated in or stood by and observed in silence. Over the past few weeks, we have also, and months at this point, we have also witnessed as a nation and city the palpable impacts that systemic racism has had on the lives of Black and Indigenous people, peoples of color, immigrants, disabled and immunosuppressed people, LGBTQ+ people, and people living in low-income communities and poverty impacted by COVID-19. White supremacy continuously manifests itself in violence at the hands of law enforcement and in interpersonal interactions, our government's response to COVID-19, and in our cultural institutions. Let us take one last moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. And for those of you who are new and are joining us today for the first time, Dance NYC delivers 5 core services for the field: advocacy, action-oriented research, leadership training and convening, technological resources through our website, and grant making, all of which to empower dance makers and cultural workers, to build audiences, and to strengthen the collective voice for the art form. Dance NYC works in alliance with the national dance organization, Dance USA, to drive local national synergies in dance service delivery. Learn more about us on our website at dance.nyc. On May 14th, as you remember, Dance NYC launched a campaign declaring loudly that artists are necessary workers. This campaign, which will run through early August, demands the acknowledgement, representation, and integration of dance and arts workers into the decision-making that will envision our future post-pandemic. Artists serve New York City at every level, leading tourism, strengthening education, fueling the economy, and ensuring our health, wellness, and imaginations. So far, as a part of this campaign, Dance NYC has released the Artists Are Necessary Workers campaign video featuring members of our dance community. We have written a letter and are now working with the Mayor's Office of New York City and DCLA to ensure that dance has a seat at the table. And lastly, we have curated the series of public conversations with arts workers to discuss challenges, offer considerations, and envision our way forward as a field. Today, our conversation will focus on the digital and the role of technology and digital experiences in the future of the arts field, focusing a lot on dance and movement. So now I'll turn it over to Sydney Skybetter, who's our moderator for today, and who will lead us into conversation. Hi, Sydney.
Okay. Hi, Candice. Is this thing on? Can you hear me?
It's on. We're here.
It's on. Well, first, Candice, thank you so much for your introduction. And can we, I know this is, we're on like multi-platforms here and time is laggy and strange, but can we just give a kind of telephonic round of applause for the phenomenal Dance NYC team? This stuff is incredibly complicated to put together, and these nerds have seamlessly crossed the streams or the wires or whatever to make all of this work. So thank you, Candice and Dance NYC, for all that you do. Much obliged, and mazel tov. Big ups.
Thank you.
Amen. So really quickly, hi. Oh, right, I need to introduce myself. Hi. So I'm Sydney Skybetter. I am a non-disabled white man of Russian heritage wearing a black t-shirt against a backdrop lifted from the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm coming at you live from unceded Wampanoag territories and my office at Brown University, where I'm a professor of choreography and emerging technologies. Now, tonight, we have some excellent nerds for you. We are going to talk about labor. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about digital platforms and equity. But I want to tee off our conversation with a possible historical inflection point. So whereas 10, 15 years ago, technologists and critics like Clay Shirky argued that emerging digital technologies were neither good nor bad, but that they sometimes had good or bad uses. I think it's now pretty clear that there are platform technologies that are empirically bad, like very, very bad. And even if we don't all agree on that point, we now have the benefit of a number of intersectional theories of performance and practice and surveillance and design and media. And I'm thinking here of Ruha Benjamin, of Simone Brown, of Sasha Costanza-Schock, that these are practices that evidence the needs for that evidence the sorts of critical rigor required when thinking about digital futures. And so in anticipation of this conversation, I don't think we can afford to talk about the digital future of dance-related communities without a steadfast commitment to engaging deeply with the relationship between hegemony and aesthetics, lest we reiterate the gross violences of dance history. So with that as a possible frame, it is now my privilege to introduce you to our evening's nerds. They will each briefly give a description of themselves and their persons, of what they do, and then we will circle back around for a more an introduction that lays some stakes for our conversation to come. So on that note, it is my privilege to introduce you first to André. André, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. My name is André M Zachary. I am the artistic director of Renegade Performance Group, and my pronouns are he, him. I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Lenape and Canarsie peoples in what is now known as Brooklyn, New York. I identify as an African-American man. I have dark skin. I am wearing a black t-shirt with headphones, and my virtual background is a photo of the skylight at Fulton Street Center. Good to be here with everybody.
Right. Thank you, André. Can we now hear from Ashley?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Ferro-Murray. I'm a cisgendered white woman. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently on Mohican land, part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is also commonly known as Troy, New York. I appear able-bodied, but I'm a recent leukemia survivor. I have brown hair. I'm wearing gold dangly earrings and a white button-up shirt with white embroidered polka dots. And I have some abstract prints behind me with pink, purple, and teal. And I'm sitting on a gray couch. Nice to be with you all today.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm gesturing towards your image as though that makes any sense in this environment. Can we now please hear from Gabri?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite, Dance NYC, and thank you for having time to share with all those fellow nerds. So my name is Gabri Christa. She, her, hers. I'm on Staten Island, Lenape land. I am a brown-skinned woman of Caribbean descent, or as my dear friend Felix de Roy said, a product of Dutch colonial orgasm. I am sitting at my dining room table in front of a record collection. I did say that I have brown skin. I do have brown skin. I have long hair. I have 2 necklaces on. I have 2 earrings on 4 total, both sides. And my dress is brown and blue. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now going to cycle back through our discussants. I'm going to ask that they take a moment to maybe share a slightly longer bio, a bit of bio data about themselves, and then maybe one sentence of something that they would like to discuss, be it a provocation, a question, or some kind of pre-critical thought. So we're just going to cycle right back through. André, please take it away.
Thank you, Sydney. So as a choreographer and technologist, I do have to shout out people like Gabri, Christa, spaces such as Ohio State University, Rosaniga Shaw, Thomas F. de France at Duke University, and several others in the field and across the field who've been doing some amazing work in really negotiating, I think, this more equitable and pivotal stance for dance and technology, I would say, to emerge for greater representation, for shifts in perspective, And then I think my last shout out right now, and hopefully I can come back a little bit later and say a little bit more of the work I'm doing, is to Dr. Sharon Ray, who convened a collective of Africanists and Black scholar, artists, and technologists together into a consortium called Artificial Intelligence for Africa, or AI for Africa. And right now, a lot of work within this collective is being done to address issues not just of technology in the sense of gadget or material consumption, but also of reconsidering information systems, language systems, access systems, whether that be in the analog or digital realm, especially pertaining to nations, countries, and persons of African origin and descent on the continent and the globe at large.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Moving on next to Ashley, please throw down.
Throwing. Thanks, Andre. It's really great to hear about that work. And I'm super thrilled to be in conversation with everyone tonight. I am the Curator of Theater and Dance at EMPAC, which stands for the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center. It's located at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, so we're affiliated with the university. And before coming to EMPAC as a curator, I was a maker and a scholar, and I did work in performance studies as a scholar, and really my background does come from the thinking of some of these histories that Sydney importantly brought up for us at the beginning of this discussion, which I really appreciated. And I think, you know, in approaching curatorial work at a place called the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center, which if you Google a photograph of it, looks kind of like a giant spaceship. One of the things that I find myself doing often is sort of dispelling this myth that actually the work we do isn't only like internet-based work or highly digital practices. Actually, I'm really interested in taking a kind of historically revisionist approach to what the relationship between technology and performance is, thinking about the complicated histories of the relationship between race and technology, disability and technology, gender and sexuality and technology, and kind of shifting our definitions and assumptions about what this field might look like. And as my pre-critical thought, something I've been thinking about a ton of late that I'm really can't wait to discuss with you all is how it feels that in this post-COVID moment, the field is really jumping to the internet. Whereas, you know, I will admit that I have not curated one internet-based work in my tenure as a curator of technology and performance. And so I'd love to kind of think through the hybridity of what the relationship between technology and technology is from access standpoints, from theoretical and historical standpoints, and then from practical standpoints.
Ashley FM, thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Gabri, please take it away.
Hi, thank you. That was great, Ashley and Andre. It's hard not to just jump right in, but I will say, so I'm an associate professor, you can read it in the bio, I think, too, but at Barnard College, I'm a maker, I'm a dancer, also direct a movement lab at Barnard, and the founder and curator for the Moving Body, Moving Image Festival, a screen dance festival that looks at movement through a social justice lens. And we did go digital, so Ashley, I can talk about that. My critical thought really is about why would we use technology? And really think about it really clearly of when is it necessary, when is it just a gadget, when is it needed. I do come from a fellowship of 1 year in global brain health. I did Zoom for 12 months every Tuesday. I hate it. I'm on it right now. I did learn a lot. I've also been Skyping with my family for years. And I'm both grateful for technology and I have a really strange relationship with it. right now, I think also there is the human connection. And so jumping off, just did something with South Africa and some other continents. I'm interested in the possible connections, but really, again, keeping the human in it. And then accessibility is a big one. Does that make any sense? So that's about it.
Thank you. So much to dig through here. I'm struck in listening to you all of the kind of the need for deliberation and a kind of almost agnosticism, a kind of ambivalence in our approach to emerging technologies. I'm hearing that we are not interested in maybe just sort of jumping into the technology for technology's sake, but maybe there's a conversation about when we are compelled to use or utilize these emerging platforms and media. I want to quickly though shout out, we have some also phenomenal nerds in the Facebook chat. So many nerds all over the place. So I want to say a quick hi to Alison Cook-Beatty and to Nora Zuniga Shaw, Greg Udam. Hi, we see you, much obliged. Thank you all for coming out tonight. So now I want to talk a little bit through our agenda for the evening, such as it is. With these comments as a kind of a constellation, I'm going to ask a few leading questions to our guests. We're going to have a lightly facilitated conversation. And then my hope is to open to a conversation that involves the audience in so much as the technology ironically permits. So with that said, I'm wondering if we can go back through the line and talk a little bit about your observations about how dance communities have been changing their use of technology over time. And I'm intentionally not putting parameters around what time means or what technology is in this context. I'm interested in how the communities that you interface with or participate in, how their use of technology has changed over time. André, please take it away.
Thanks, Sydney. There's so many ways that can be looked at over decades or even over days. I would say a lot of that can be considered through the constant reconsideration of representation, especially within Black dance traditions, radical Black gestures, within spaces of queer Black announcement, with spaces of Black feminist overarching theories and practices, and those articulations have really shifted how artists are being, I think, strategic in applying communication between themselves and the audience, or between artist to artist. I think one of the important ways in which that, I would say, to address your question, especially in relationship to Black artists in this hemisphere, I don't want to speak too much on the African continent because I don't know what necessarily goes on there, but specifically in this hemisphere, and then I guess more directly in the United States, it's been a way to circumvent institutional barriers or long-standing institutional barriers due to white oppressive practices. And so that has been a really kind of amazing way in which people can place themselves in spaces that might otherwise have been off limits, or even introduce spaces in transgressive ways that have kind of been recentered otherwise kind of Black movement or political gestures that might not be, quote, respectable. And I think that that's kind of the brilliant way for me in which I've seen these negotiations of artists using and really bringing, I guess, their voice through the different technologies that they have either one access to or they transform into making their own space.
Right. Thank you, André. I think that's a vital reminder, not only of the situatedness of our conversation this evening, but that a lot of these technologies that we're maybe alluding to have the effect of bringing about flux or rendering some of these boundaries somewhat porous. So we're talking about a complex field, a kind of a matrix of both technologies and communities in the plural. Thank you, André. Ashley, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that I'm just pausing for a moment because the question about like longer history and then shorter history, André, I appreciated your saying days because it does feel like things are shifting all of a sudden so quickly. But I do think I'll start with just the acknowledgement that it has felt to me like the field was historicized for a period, like 80s, 90s, in terms of the type of work that happens in a lab, right? Happens when you pair an artist with an engineer, happens within the context of digital animation. It feels like the most kind of revered examples, right? Cunningham's biped or Bill T. Jones' ghost catching are sort of the things that when I'm teaching like a freshman seminar, that's my, you know, hard-hitting early 90s start. But like, what if we think about 1980s AIDS choreography and how John Byrne was concocting like DIY, you know, biomedical treatments for himself before HIV and AIDS were even called that. And what if we think about AIDS choreography, for example, as central to the history of the relationship between dance and technology? And so I think, and we could go so much further back than that, right? So to kind of introduce that as a little bit of a premise, to then start to think about COVID-19 as a moment when we're again sort of confronting a deeply present medical situation. Alice Shepard had some brilliant quotes in Dance Magazine recently about the relationship between disability and dance within the context of COVID and how this moment is sort of shifting the landscape a little bit. And so I think that right now there can be different ways that we think about where technology is showing up. Is it in the treatment of our bodies right now? Is it in access or lack thereof within the medical institution, which, as Candice beautifully acknowledged in the Dance NYC intro, is deeply connected to the fate of our dance world right now. And so thinking a little bit about the hybridity of the situation, because then of course, you know, we are jumping to technical platforms to get our work out, to get artists paid. You know, I was in the middle of a major commission with Jamil Kosako in March, and we pivoted really fast to get that thing online. And I could talk more about that, and he has talked beautifully publicly about that quite significantly, about how it simultaneously provided him a platform that he had been looking for anyway. And I think this actually came up in the Dance NYC conversation last week as well about touring, where his body to perform, you know, trauma on stage repeatedly, it was taking a toll, and he was searching for a solution to that. And in a way, this presented one. At the same time, there are tangible limits to what we can do, how we can do it, who has had experience already and who has not. So to me, these are the things that, you know, as André said, the daily, these are the questions that I find myself asking with artists on the daily right now.
Thank you for your capacious remarks. I do want to, again, shout out to Alice Shepard's work. She's an artist and a member of a team that thinks very not just inclusively, but generously about how technology interfaces with her artistic practice. And I just want to signpost that. I also actually appreciate this notion of dance history somehow starting in the 90s. But if you liked the 90s, just wait until you hear about the 80s. On that note,
hey,
Gabri,
John
please.
Byrne was in the 80s, Sydney.
I know. I don't remember. I was very young. Thank you, Ashley. Gabri, your thoughts, please.
Okay, I have too many thoughts to start with, honestly. Ashley got me going with the history, and of course I went back to, you know, Maya Deer, and who broke a lot of racial and technological things, who wrote one of the best books on voodoo. Her collaboration with Dunham, taking a camera, thinking about how that works. I'm thinking about Louis Fuller. You know, there's so many thoughts that go through my mind of the early experimentations with technology. And so the questions I'm having is, there's two things. There's utilitarian, how we can use it, which is what we are doing right now. We have Zoom. We can continue a conversation. We can continue reaching out to people. We have ways of putting a camera on our bodies and just recording what we are doing, social media, TikTok, name it. We have all that without too much thought behind it. I dare say sometimes it's just this need to still be seen, to still feel community. So that's the part that's there. And that happens across continents. Again, I did a talk with colleagues all over the world and part in the African continent. But then there is this part where maybe I think that would be interesting to go back to, sort of jumping off of Ashley and jumping off of our oh, somebody's coming in. Hi, person. And if we can start thinking about how that can sort of get us back to the experimentation of the media and how we use it and why, if we cannot just put a camera on something, but what can we say, how does it transform, how can we communicate, and what community do we want to reach, and why, and should we be on camera? And so many questions around that, right? We get more comfortable being on it. Part of me feels, I don't know, we're having a little jitters, right? I'm thinking, oh, we're going to be recorded and this is going to live on. I better, like, you know, make sure my hair is okay. And you have all these like little vanities that we have, right? But then there is also this part of like, why are we doing it? If it's communication, how can we go back? What, and why? I mean, yeah, so those are the thoughts I had. Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts, but that's it.
No, I so appreciate your insistence on the why. Why? We shouldn't try to escape that question, maybe, even though you also allude to the kind of ease of access to a certain extent of these technologies. Cameras, smart devices, our computers, these are all, at least for us at the moment, relatively accessible. But perhaps there are also conversations about like the kinds of labor and inequities that are sort of buried or made not visible to us as a result of that ease. We have it easy, but these technologies come from somewhere. And perhaps the labor and ethical consequences of that are also worth discussing. I also, so many good, oh, please, go ahead.
I want to also go back to that, but also say that, yes, we should look at how how these devices we use are being used. And sorry, my cat really likes coming on screen.
Your cat is adorable. This is going well.
But also, also thinking that there might be a democracy within that, which is what some of the African artists were talking about 2 weeks ago, that it did give them a little bit of autonomy in using what we have. And so, yeah, I ask a lot of why questions. Why are we doing this?
No, and you're also alluding to how these different communities of practice and production intersect, which I think is very useful. I also want to shout out to some more excellent nerds on the Facebook. We've got Douglas Scott, Wen, hi, Kate Ladenheim. Thank you all for joining us this evening. So many good nerds here. Now, I want to return to our discussants. And I want to ask a question of trajectory, having very briefly articulated to put some sort of stakes into a kind of history or ways of thinking about your dance history or a dance history. I wonder what your dance histories sort of mean in terms of our potential future or a potential near future. Maybe what are some of the risks? What are some of the opportunities that are afforded by thinking of dance practice, of technologic practice in the ways that you've articulated? André, please.
One way is, and thank you to Gabri and Ashley for bringing these names to the conversation. One idea for me is, I think as Gabri brought Louis Fuller, is as I often articulate, these technologies in their application in the art form have been around for now almost 140 years, going back to the late Victorian era, Belle Epoque in Paris with Louis Fuller and the Lumiere brothers, and this advent of the camera and the moving frame. In that frame, I think is that's such a fraught space, and so we can translate that frame from where we're looking right now into also then the proscenium frame, and kind of to fast forward then, if we're speaking how Ashley's looking at ghost catching and biped or ocean from Bitsy Jones or Merce Cunningham respectively. It's through which frame are we now taking in this work, or are we entering back and forth in this dialogue with the work, and then understanding that in other instances there might not actually be a frame at all, and the work actually might be coming from yourself. If we're looking, if we're considering, I guess, these histories. And so I guess how much I want to say it as quickly as possible. One of the things is the viewer or we looking back always through a frame or a mediatized portal, rather than reconnecting first through the body and its history and its then tangible history between other bodies, and also then elevating those instances of history and lineage and chronology as urgent and as necessary as this Euro-white Western framing to then comprehend the work. And so I think that's where the challenge of then embracing a digital future to also then center the body is to me, it is this amazing kind of paradox, but also a really, really necessary way to, in an ironic way, to use this frame to actually bring back so many of these practices and these histories that exist that can only be actually learned or encountered through the body, the tangible, and the corporeal. And I think that that's actually pretty amazing. And that actually might yield some really fantastic, hopefully fantastic results for us in the field and beyond.
Totally, I'm struck by your juxtaposing the sort of Western hegemonic arbitrary rectangle, the frame that we are literally having this conversation within. I mean, I'm just a white guy in a spaceship, but you can see the box around me, around all of us, and yet you're also alluding to sort of embodied histories, what Graham problematically called blood memory, these ways of considering bodily intelligence or experience that can be juxtaposed or hit the kind of arbitrary geometries of Western dance tradition, of the Western artistic canon at odd angles. I'm also reminded as you speak of the kind of growing tenets of data feminism, which are very much about putting bodies first, as opposed to rendering them as objects. And of course, the history of that is complicated and more extensive than we have time to get into, but thank you.
Yes, that's so,
yes.
sorry. I'm so sorry. And I think that's the other thing is that, and I'm so sorry to interrupt. But
no, you go.
I think the challenge to do what you just said, because this mediatized frame, in a way, strips the humanity out of this view, this whatever body is actually there. And I think that that's the challenge, to actually historicize bodies and reassign them humanity in a way.
Amen. We should do that. And to do that, Ashley.
I don't know about that. I'm gonna deflect to the comments for just a moment, because Dee Dee Johns, I hope I'm saying your last name right, but brought up in the comments, I want to also think about technologies from non-Western perspectives, technologies of spirituality and nature. And I thought that that comment actually applied beautifully, André, to what you were talking about as well. And also makes me think of some really fabulous work that I will name drop, just because it's been very inspiring to me of late. Nigel Whitson working incredibly on links between Blackness, darkness, spirituality in the Unrival experiments. Also thinking about Christopher K. Morgan's work on his native Hawaiian identity and the relationship. He's doing some really fabulous work with visual artist Brenda Mallory, visualizing DNA structures and the way that they relate also to natural materials. And yeah, so I just think that that was a really great connection that I wanted to bring up. And yeah, Sydney, your comment also about like futures and thinking about where we go. I have no idea lately. I've been really sitting in like, I don't fucking have any idea. And so I just want to offer that. I think, and I'd like to like speak to some of the practicalities of it for a moment. I'm sitting in an institution where we're having daily conversations, both internally and with artists, about, we're gonna do this, no, we're gonna do that. No, we're gonna do this, no, we're gonna do that. We can do this, wait, we can't do that. We have to wait on the university for this, maybe we can do that. And so I think like, on the one hand, it feels really trite to harp on the realities of the moment. And on the other hand, I just can't escape them currently. And I think that they're having like extraordinary material impacts on the folks in our field. And like how we pay people and how we pay people without imposing this hegemonic frame. And like how we do it while still holding very true to the why that Gabri is asking, and how we are going to move forward while prioritizing payment and well-being without forcing a certain type of work on folks. To me, the excitement of this technology performance realm has been that it's not required, right? Like it can, and like I harp all the time on like, don't do it unless it's necessary. Like, please don't do it, you know, come to EMPAC, play with all of the things, have exposure to them, and then figure out what doesn't work and get rid of it. Like, don't feel pressure to put all of this media in your work when it's not working, when you don't want it there, when it feels too heavy in the end. How can we stay true to that during this moment when folks need exposure somehow? They need to keep working. One of the things that I've been thinking a ton about, and I know I have other colleagues who are really fighting for this as well, is like, how do we just have no deliverables associated with contracts in the next year plus? How do we move away from traditional performance timelines How do we get donors, funders, institutional structures around us to recognize that work happens over a duration, that it's not associated with a single evening performance, that especially technological research takes learning, it takes education, it takes exposure, it takes access. Maybe we can use this year and a half to really think about the problems in our field that have been existing, that are related to white supremacy deeply. And like, what does it look like to actually just take time and slow down and get away from the production model for a moment to just address the deep problems, and creatively think together about solutions moving forward. And I'm personally running up against lots of practical obstacles in wanting to do that, but it does feel like the way forward to me.
Holy shit, Ashley. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're yes to all of that. My why comes a lot out of that, Ashley, and everyone. My why is always, you don't have to use technology. I ask myself the same question. Does it really give something extra that I need, or is this the only way I can talk to it? At the Movement Lab, we have artists in residence, and they don't really have a deliverable. I do ask them to share something that could just be talking about their work or nothing, or just sit, whatever form it is. And that feels already like a little stone of just take away the pressure. Something as an artist that I feel myself is always really hard, because it's all this thing of like coming up with this new thing and show that you're productive, and then there's a time in between, right, that you do other things. But it's really also, it's really thinking about how can we also share the resources. How can people get paid? I'm deeply worried. I'm really fortunate to have work right now and have a computer. But in our field, a lot of people are not okay. And so that's always been the case, right? This is why I started making films, because I was paying my babysitter more than the dancers at one point. And that still is a big grief in me, but I was already experimenting. So let's experiment that way, or okay, lets me just try this. But I think it's really important to deeply think about, why are we even discussing technology? Obviously, because this is the only way we can connect with each other right now. But I really want us to talk a lot more about that if we can, and the injustices in that. And in that, of course, going back to André, it's like, yes, African continents, yes, other continents, yes, places where people have less access, but also in this country where there's less access, right? I mean, take down capitalism. Can we start there? I mean, I can go into this whole thing. There is a need to actually just have these kind of conversations, to do this deep thinking, deep research, deep questioning. What's in our body? Adana talks about other modalities, but of course we have this whole long history of dances, of cosmetology, I can never say that word in English, the whole cosmos, and deep knowledge of herbs, deep trauma that lives in our body. I'm doing a 12-month training with Resma Menachem, and that part by abolishing racism in the body and the generation. So there's a lot of things that I want us both to talk about technology, but also really get back to our bodies and how that corresponds and how it's been corresponding. If that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. So much to possibly further discuss and undertake. I'll just note, somewhat hearing between André, Ashley, and Gabri, there seems to be a relationship between a certain kind of uncertainty of the moment, of the COVID moment, but also precarity. So like to be uncertain is to have options or to make choices potentially, and to be precarious is not necessarily as such, and certainly these things are related. And so on that note, I'm actually going to skip ahead and stop asking questions of myself, because we're getting some really great questions from our Facebook nerd gaggle. I want to quickly go to Nora's excellent question. I'm going to attempt to read this with inflection. Nora Zuniga Shaw, the inimitable, says, thank you for recentering on our bodies, Andre. Yes, exclamation point. What are you all thinking about these days in terms of touch, simultaneous experience, tangible experience at a distance, heart spaces, embodied presence? So Nora recentering the body, thinking about haptics, embodiment, and maybe new or novel or maybe historical ways of connecting across bodies through platforms. Curious your thoughts.
Well, hi Nora, wish I could see your face. You know, I just want to be in a room with everybody. It's a really hard question. Been doing some workshopping with people, connecting with people who have are disabled and also hard of hearing. In the case of working with my mom, who has dementia and also is in a wheelchair and also has problems hearing, and then connecting over this. And there's a lot of, you know, we do a lot of things over this thing that over the years, you don't feel it, but then I say, oh, can you feel me? And then she does this. And there's like all these little things that we do over Skype. But nothing will replace it. Technology will never replace it. You know, just when you want to be back in the room. But I'm still happy to hear from you, Nora. So I don't have anything. I think I was thinking a few things about this. Scientists get a lot of money because there isn't like a utilitarian, you know, hopefully they come up with something, but most of the time they come up with nothing, right? And how can we translate that into the arts so we can get that kind of capital to maybe work on what works in the human dance realm? I always really want somebody to advocate for that. And I'm going to leave my other points. But yeah, that's too long of a thing. So I'm going to not take space. No, go ahead.
Not at all. It was, I think, a very generous reframe. And Andre, actually, I'm super curious. We have some other comments from Candice and some others about maybe opportunities here to compose new rituals, new gestures of intimacy or of affection. I mean, Gabri, you kissed the screen. I'm gonna do that. Did I do that right? I don't even know. I need to practice this gesture of this new gesture of intimacy. So Andre, actually, I'm curious what kinds of either novel gestures or novel connections you're seeing. What kinds of new rituals have you maybe observed?
I'm actually going to attempt to address a few questions and comments from some people I know and people I don't know. So I'm thinking now, and shout out to Tara Willis who left a comment, and I'm going to attempt to link this question to comment to Sydney Mosley. Shout out to Sydney Mosley. I've been really interested in Tara's work, more specifically in which through some of her research fellowship that was through the New York Public Library of the Performing Arts, and in her 2018 curation of B.B. Miller, Ralph Lemon, and Ishmael Houston Jones. And a lot of that kind of made sense in hearing Tara speak about this project and this visibilizing the archive, that I was just like, that's what you're trying to do. Okay, cool. And I might be messing that up, so, you know, holla at me, Tara. But essentially, it was a really ambitious way of curating an archive of living artists, importantly at that, but also bringing it forward in these alternative ways. And then most recently, I know, I think it's on the MCA website as well, the performance between BB, Ralph, and Ishmael. Luckily, I was actually able to see the performance live. But I think in lieu of that, there's something now for me to address what Sydney was speaking about. I think this is also a moment where artist to artist, we can reconsider what archive means. And this kind of goes back to history, and we can reconsider what, how archive is even accessed. Because then I kind of want to address a comment from Alejandra and Helena Nakiki Brown and Yo-Yo Lin, and then with their concerns on disability. And so and movement, performance, and culture. And so then from there, one of the things I'm constantly interested in is like equitable space for differently abled persons, disabled persons. How do they access our archives and our work? And I think that this is maybe, this is, to me, is definitely a moment where we have the time to do that. And so in that sense of what Gabri was just speaking of, can we have the resources to right now just consider the work that has been done? How do we bring it forward? You know, when I'm thinking about Sydney's work, Body Business, that essentially was addressing literally the moment of our time right now. It's how do we bring this work, how do we bring Body Business forward now in this way, you know, through the technologies that do exist, so that the archive actually may become activated and applicable in our lives. I know that was a lot of alliteration, but I think that this is a very interesting way and time and place, you know, for institution, for audience, and then also audience to open that up and actually hear in a really kind of like no stakes way, you know, what is actually important or what is undiscovered for audience or unknown or has been hidden that can be revealed or understood through this kind of reactivating of archive in unique ways. And so I think that to me is a great alternative, not alternative, but that's work. That's, you know what I mean? Like that's absolute work. That's work that, again, I can sit my ass right here at home and do that. So people who are wheelchair bound, yeah, they can definitely do that work. And then they can consider, okay, when I'm looking at this work, I'm considering it in this perspective and lens, you know, and from this new framing to then bring forward. And I think that this is, again, this is the potential that institutions actually, I mean, a lot of work can still be done, I guess is what I'm saying. In lieu of, yes, of body to body coming together, you know, for health, literal health reasons, we can. But I think there's some really amazing things that from people that I've already seen in this timeline, and then the institutions that they're a part of, the work that they do, the minds that are in their heads and their spirits that can come together, and actually some pretty dope shit can probably emerge, I think. So I mean, that's my answer to kind of get and address as many of those comments and questions as I saw.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm not going to take this up, I just want to acknowledge for myself that again, in Movement Lab, I work with people. It's all about collaboration, you know, and even here, I want to also, we said it in the beginning, acknowledge all the people behind the scene who collaborate in it. So I just want to really say we're Kai Delancey and Ali Costa, really important for the thinking and the talking through a lot of things we're dealing with and also developing it. So part of this is also that there is a lot of collaboration going on here, and I don't want us to lose sight of that for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, so across André and Gabri, I'm hearing a lot of interest in consideration of what is work right now, what is the work to be done, and even though the work, the labor of our communities is not as afforded us right now as perhaps it was, or like the ways that we work now are different than they were 6 months ago, perhaps. That's not equally true for everybody. But perhaps there's also an opportunity to think deeply about what it means to be in community with one another right now, and what it means to be in support of our communities right now. With that, I'll toss it back to Ashley. I'm curious your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, I think it means a lot of different things to be in community with one another. And, you know, I'm not even going to be, I've been reading the comments also as André and Gabri have been talking, and some different things have come up, and now I don't remember where they came from, so forgive me. But I think, you know, the touch question from Nora and the spirituality question from before might come into play here when we think about community. And, you know, I'll share maybe that I've had to live in medical isolation myself, and found actually that there can be a sense of community in sort of spiritual convening, right? Like one can channel togetherness even when one can't be together with folks. And I think it's worth acknowledging that, like, while for some of us being separated is a new experience, it's something that others live with on and off for long periods of time for different reasons. And so, you know, Gabri, your kiss to the screen, like I saw your lips differently than I saw Sydney's lips, and I feel intimately connected to you both in different ways now. and there is something about that, right? Like maybe I wouldn't have ever seen your lips so intimately otherwise. And so I think there's that, but I do think that there's a way to be together also not in this box and not in this screen. I think there's a way to set times of thinking together. I think that there are different platforms that allow us to hear voice and not see. There was a comment that came up in the questions about accessibility in archives that I thought was super important. How are archives accessible in different ways? And I think that, again, applying this idea of hybridity to notions of the archive is important as well, right? Like what are different types of hybrid archives that have different types of accessibility to them? And then just a real quick shout out, one thing that I saw popping up a bunch is like, who's going to fund these things? Great to think about duration and non-deliverables, but like, how are we going to get the money for it? How can it go also to smaller companies and individual artists who don't have a ton of resources? And just a quick thought on that is that I have been thinking a lot about the role of the university institution in all of this. And one thing that we've been doing within our university context alone is really categorizing the work as research, which we've always done, but sort of doubling down on that, right? And universities are in the business of funding research, and that won't go away. I think it will shift, and I think those resources are absolutely shifting, and those of us who work in university contexts feel that deeply as furloughs are happening, and adjunct and other faculty are being laid off, and you know, I could go on and on, but I do wonder about really pulling the university close in this time within the dance field, and you know, validating our work as a research practice as well, and using that for granting and for funding purposes, I think can be helpful in this moment. So yeah, I know that's different from the community question, but.
Thank you, Ashley. And yeah, I want to return to this this question of community, because it does seem that, or communities, because this does seem, it seems like we have multiple unfolding precarities at the moment, some corporeal, many economic. I do want to take just a quick note as a bit of a corrective. We want to acknowledge terminology, correct our use of the word disabled versus differently abled, as well as wheelchair user instead of wheelchair bound. Thank you, Facebook community, for correcting our word choices there. I want to dig into this notion of community and communities here. And I wonder what it means for us, especially those of us who are representing universities here, to be thinking about how to distribute opportunities, to distribute capital, distribute access to health resources or other forms of either compensation or enabling other people's well-being. I wonder what it means for us to think generously towards our community, even as we are physically it feels like we're very, very far apart. So I just want to lean into this question of like, what can we do now through technologized media or what have you? What can we do to reaffirm our community? What can we do to be of support for our people?
Yeah, so a few things I also saw in the chat about, training for Black and brown bodies. At Barnard, I started in the movement lab, a virtual lab where people can, we started as a response to COVID. We just prompts and people can respond to it different ways. When thinking about an open virtual lab, and we talked about it briefly, we sort of have an open hours, a way of calling in or listing, hey, connect here if you have questions or need some guidance. So that's a part. There are things like Ghetto Film School, DCTV, there is a list, and I'm sure Dance NYC might have that, but maybe we could compel that organizations that actually do offer training free for the person who asked that in here for training Black and brown bodies. A lot of times those things are not workable, but I really I had a conversation today with Greg Jargon today, was texting, and he's on the here, about framing a research as artistic research, and really talking about research so that we can learn to give value to what we do, and maybe we need to frame it differently. And this is again coming out of working with scientists and thinking, how can we open it up in the research? Maybe we need to talk different about our work, which is physical labor, but really it's research, and that will give value. And how can that be backed up for all dancers, that we are truly doing a research and a great service to humanity, not just only the art making and the product, but the whole thing. So how can we even change the language? How can we get that value for what we do, what we all know, because we're preaching, we all know the value, right? How can we really think about making that a value? And it did not address directly, sorry Sydney, the question about the university. I know a lot what the university could do. I've only did, the movement lab, I have autonomy, but the rest is an hierarchical system still, right? And so there are limits, and there's money making and capitalism that go into my capitalist stance against. So let's not do that now. So
yeah, capitalism. Let's not. Gabri, again, as always, so much to unpack there. I appreciate your focus on the words and your reiterating comments from the Facebook about the vocabulary. And I'm noting here some great comments from Wen about the jargon that we are at times using, that I am certainly guilty of using with too great a frequency. André, actually, I'm curious your thoughts here, either in terms of orienting towards community or otherwise.
Thinking about what Gabri was just speaking, and I think sometimes some people actually don't necessarily know the impact of their work or the value of their work, and I think that's something that maybe allowing resources to help artists kind of really know how much or how much their work extends, beyond themselves. I think might actually might be revealed through using more resources and stuff like that. Or being able to have access to more resources. It's still something for me about repairing history through this digital future. I think that is this kind of a reoccurring irony, and allowing us to look at the various paths that have led to this moment in our performing and art and dance field, that have, you know, again, we haven't even just built a light to shine on those paths, really. And I think that would be something really interesting that could maybe go in line with this, with helping artists realize how much work how much impact their work actually might have, or for communities to say, oh wow, I didn't know this artist was actually, you know, doing such important work, you know, I guess I bring, you know, Sydney Mosley back in, you know, with the Windows 6 project addressing street harassment, and then, you know, finding a way to say, okay, you know, how can we take some of the action items that the Windows 6 project, you know, even within its curriculum are doing, that we can maybe realize, you know, through this digital future. And the intention of Sydney's work and the piece, you know, can be realized in a very unique way. So I think for me, that's where where and how this turning towards community hopefully could work on a practical level. I hope.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm sorry. I wanted to really say, and also to Wen Chang, sorry if I say your name wrong, but I think we, us collectively, including myself, is also, that's why I said also, like, I like the social media. We are institutions, but a lot of people are not. So for me, it's really important that we don't just talk about high art, that all dance values, every form is valuable. There is not one that's better than the other. I started dancing late. You know, I come from Caribbean dance and everything else. And so I want to just really frame it. We're not just talking about what's in the theaters. We're not just talking about, we're not just talking about what is acceptable because of the sort of the Western eyes that we've learned in our dance history books. We're not talking about that. We really are talking about everything. However, you know, I'm in academia, so that's my frame prompt right now, where I never thought I would end up, but, or be. So yeah, I just really want to put that out there. There's not one form I have in mind when I talk, or one thing that and I think any of us is preferencing of that, or
yeah. Similarly, Gabri, in the comments, I think a part of the same comment you're addressing, the question of jargon came up, right? Like, what kind of language we're using to talk about this, and how accessible that language is, and where it's rooted. And obviously a lot of the language that we've used tonight is rooted in these extremely privileged and difficult to access academic institutions. And I guess for me, I appreciate that comment and call out in the comments. I think it's really important, especially within the context of a digital conversation, because the other way that jargon comes into play in our field is technical jargon, and how, you know, like, love you, EMPAC tech team watching, but sitting around the table and having technical meetings between artists and the tech team, you know, it's a different kind of a parlance, right? And so I find myself often stopping to say, wait, what does that mean? Wait, what's that? And just to acknowledge that even within that community of people who do know that jargon, often you don't know all of the jargon, but if you're not familiar with the community and these practices of working, it can feel very off-putting, and one can feel like, ooh, I don't belong here. And so I really do appreciate that focus on language and jargon on multiple levels, super important to hold tight and think about. And for me, it brings me back to, Sydney, your comment about community. I've been thinking a lot about who our community is at EMPAC. I think we have a long way to go as far as serving our local community, for example. And I think that we could do a lot. We have a lot of resources. We could do a ton as far as getting folks who don't have access to technology, or access to knowledge about how to use media. And I think, you know, in our local community, shout out to Sanctuary for Independent Media. They work really closely with youth in our community who doing like technical workshops, filmmaking workshops, things like that. And there are folks doing that work. I think it's super important work. And one benefit of this COVID moment has been that it's reminded me that actually, you know, we don't have to fly people here. We have a huge community of people. And I think that that's been one real struggle on the EMPAC level, is to remember our different communities and hold them close. And so while we all feel very far from one another, we do have neighbors next door, right? We do have folks down the street. And so what does it look like also to consider a local conversation because of COVID, because of environmental impact reasons? How can we do both is something I've been thinking a lot about.
Yeah, and it would require a lot of breaking the walls, right? When we talk about university, we're in Haarlem. I love that. And I'm doing intergenerational work with a lot of aging. And I'm like, well, there's all these elders in Haarlem. Let's invite them, all of them. Let's come to Barnard. Let's come do this and that, right? I would make the call right away. But again, there is the institutional things that there's a lot to unpack there, which also we won't go into right now. But those are like, how can we open our doors like on a larger scale? And then you can't escape capitalism and money making. Again, sorry, because there is where we go. Because it's like, who pays for it and who has access, you know, and all of those things. But I think there is definitely a way of sharing resources. But that payment is a big issue for me. Like, how do you pay people? How do you pay people? How do you pay? What are we gonna do with the dancers that can't perform? What other value can we give? You know, my daughter, who is just turned 17, was a big André Young fan, not to talk about politics, but just money for people to just be and do and continue. And there's other models, but I don't know how to do that in this country.
That's so much to unpack there. I love this. I appreciate the centering of getting people paid. Like, there's a lot of other things that we need to address, but under capitalism, we need to get our people paid. And what I think, and somewhat echoing Andre's earlier comments, being within not only under capitalism, but within an attention economy, how we shout out to our people is consequential, right? How we pay attention is consequential. And so this is my way of segueing to, unfortunately, somehow, our last question of the evening. I want to thank again the many very active participants in the Facebook group. We see you, we appreciate you, thank you. I want to thank again our phenomenal team at Dance NYC for all of the labor and work that hews all of this together. My final question for our three discussants, apropos paying attention, I'm wondering if you can share in our final moments maybe a project, an organization, a company, an individual, a guild, something that you want more people to know about. And then I would love if you could ask people tell people what you wanted them to do with that knowledge, be it join or support, give money, be aware of. I'd love for you to shout out to something and then tell us what you want us to do with that knowledge. André, please take it away.
Thanks, Sydney. I'm going to bring back the collective AI for Africa. And right now, the project that we're focusing on is called Cosmo Ubuntu. And the focus on machine translation and cognitive code switching. I hope a link was sent out in the chat. The focus right now is, right now the partnership is between the United Nations Global Summit and the panel which just happened proposed a philosophical intervention in machine learning and artificial intelligent praxis using the concept Cosmo Ubuntu, and essentially looking for African solution-oriented intervention, and Cosmo Ubuntu being a humane, theoretical, and solutionary approach to technological innovation and policies that address issues of global justice. And this collective and consortium of myself and other artists are, again, focusing on quality of life as the centered focus of machine learning, artificial intelligence, collaborations, and redistribution of resources and creation of capital as well. In this collective, focusing on the global South, the African diaspora, and the African continent. So, shout out to Cosmo Ubuntu, and I'll put the link, and hopefully it can reach the chat. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andre. Ashley, please take it away.
Yeah, I would say pay artists, pay individual artists, pay Black artists, pay BIPOC artists, pay trans artists, pay disabled artists, pay artists. And fun fact, many artists have Venmo links and other ways to pay them directly on their websites, linked to their social media. And so artists put those things there to acknowledge another form of maybe evil technology like Venmo that we can maybe co-opt and tactically use for good. And so I'm really excited about opportunities to pay individual artists directly during this time. I think that that's one way that we can get out of the institution and that we can rally around folks who need direct and immediate support. So that's what I would say. And then an organization to check out that I learned about through artist Yada Travieso is Digital Bodega, Bronx-based creative house, production house. They do awesome work in terms of access to cameras and technologies for working artists, local, especially to the Bronx area. Check them out. They're fabulous. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Hi. So I don't know which group to start with. I think follow Dance NYC. There's a lot, and what I'm gonna do, Candice and Ale and everybody, is send the links of some organizations locally that have some digital resources. Maybe that would be a good way of also starting. Personally, I've been very happy with the Black Archives in the Netherlands. Finally talking about the Black history of the Netherlands, which is, vast, as we know. So that's a person, like an organization that I've been following. And yeah, I have a whole list, and I can read that. There's so many people doing great work. We're talking a lot about body, brain, trauma, how trauma lives in the brain, in the body. And then also, what do we do with that, like, knowledge? I'm in a why phase right now, as you know. Why am I doing? What am I doing next? What do I want to preserve? So it's also supporting. I said it last time, but I really believe in facilitating other people's work. There's Angela's Pulse. Even in New York, there's so many organization groups that do great work. My friend Warrington Hutland has the cast and crew of color. I mean, I can name it. And I think what I will do is I definitely promise right now, I will send the list to Dance NYC of resources that might be helpful, instead of just calling out one organization. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabri. For myself, I just want to very quickly shout out to Sasha's the book Design Justice, which came out recently. Sasha Constanza-Schock. It is a book that is not only about sort of intersectional approaches to design of objects, of technologies, but also by extension organizations and productive practices, inclusive of things like dance and live art. On that note, I'm gonna sign off in just a moment and take a few ibuprofen because my neck is hurting me from all of the nodding in agreement that I've been doing for the last hour and a half. Thank you all, esteemed discussants. Thank you, Dance NYC, so much for your kickassery tonight. Thank you to the phenomenal nerds in the Facebook. And on that note, I'm going to toss it back to Candice. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. This was quite the conversation. We had so much engagement from folks on Facebook. So thank you for everything that you shared and all of the resources that you shared with us during your time. If you go back and look at the Facebook comments, like we've been posting a lot of the resources and links as you've been calling them out. So I think there's a lot for people to parse through even right now. But before we all leave, I just want to talk about next week's event. We'll be talking about what's next for festivals, and we'll be chatting with Pamela Tage, Carisha Batan of Queensborough Dance Festival. Pamela Tage is the executive and artistic director of Jacob's Pillow. We'll be talking as well with Stanford Makishi, the vice president for programming at the New York City Center, and with Denise Roberts-Hurlin, the founding director of Dancers Responding to AIDS. As you've seen, we've been posting resources in the chat today. We will gather those and post them in the event Facebook page as well as on the event webpage on our website so that we can all keep track of them. They will also go out in the thank you email that goes out a few days after our event. So just look out for that. This event is also recorded, so you can go back to Facebook if you want to rewatch it or send it to someone who you think needs to watch. Please fill out our post-event survey to let us know what you thought about today's event or give us ideas or comments about future programming. I want to thank our friends at LC Interpreting, Sarah and Kami, and our closed captioner from the Viscardi Center for their services today. Of course, I want to thank my colleagues and friends at Dance NYC for all of their work for putting this series together and making sure that we made it to event number 10. And lastly, I want to thank all of our dance community that tunes in week after week to be here with us and to discuss and challenge each other and push each other into what our next steps will be. So have a good evening, everyone, and I'll see you next Tuesday.